Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Context is King. I'm Rebecca Brayton, and with me as always is WatchMojo founder and CEO Ashkan Karbasfrooshan to discuss, I don't know, the state of journalism versus new media, I guess. It's depressing as someone with a
It's
journalism
not depressing.
degree. Well,
remember when we started and there were at that time all these articles that would be like, your journalism degrees are useless. And I used to be like, no, they're not. This is bullshit. Having been like a business grad that you would think would be like, oh, business grads are better, even though now you see what they say about MBAs. It's cyclical, it's BS. You can't let that affect you. Now, I'm not here to comment on journalism degrees and their value. That we could you studied journalism?
I did, yes.
So first off, let's start with that.
Nah.
So do you feel like when you went into college to study that, did you go in thinking it would be more valuable, so to speak? Or did you go in knowing like, hey, this is a field that clearly is going to have some turbulence?
In those days, it wasn't as clear how downward a trajectory was going to be, to me anyway. I also think...
You should have read my business articles then.
Yeah, I know. But I also think that having a broader degree is better, but that's kind of beside the point.
But you mean journalism is broad or it's not?
No, it's
enough?
niche.
Okay, it's
like
niche,
it's
okay.
very specific. Like if you want to be a writer, take English. And like I took a year of English lit before I did journalism, and I learned more about writing in that year than I did when I was in journalism.
Okay. Okay, that's really good feedback. Now, I would say that I've always been pretty constant about this, which is like a degree is really a means to an end. Like unless you want to go become like a surgeon for dog brains, which is really specific, and you're like, no, you need to have this degree. I think by and large, an education is just, do you have the discipline? Could you get along with people? Et cetera, et cetera. And I would say...
Can you learn?
And you learn. Yes, you learn, obviously. But I think it's more... The value is more questionable because there's also a lot of fields through entrepreneurship, which basically now means many things, where it's true you can learn running a business, and that business could be many things, right? So I think that's going to continue. But what's really interesting, and this is what I wanted, this is actually a positive message, is yes, journalism jobs are down, but since 2009, the number of jobs that the internet media has created has gone from 11% to 36%, like from about 87,000 to over 277,000. That's an enormous spike. Now, I do think that that's going to plateau a bit. I'm not sure if it'll continue like that in the new decade. What's interesting is, though, whereas broadcast and cable was 25 to get now, it's slightly down from a decade ago, which was at 26, and radio, which was at 11, which is 11 now, was at 12%. So again, it's pretty even, surprisingly. I think where basically just the losses came from was just print media, which shouldn't come as a surprise. Newspapers and magazines used to account for today account for 17 and 11% respectively, but they used to account a decade ago for 35 and 16, so over 50%. So the clear loss has been print.
Do they specify what kind of jobs, though? Like, are they full-time versus freelance?
Well, these are jobs, so they have to be, these are job losses, so they're full-time.
Okay.
I think what you've also seen is a lot of these jobs have been migrated into, I was talking to...
I think the rise of freelance.
No, the freelance, yeah, unfortunately, and I think to some extent some companies abuse it, which is why in California they passed this law where if you write over 25 articles, you have to be a full-timer. But I think the problem is that was addressed to kind of like, contain the Ubers and the WeWorks, or no, just the Ubers that exploit, contract employees who should be full-time. Now there's been a lot of freelancers that have come out and said, whoa, I had a great flexible lifestyle. I was, freelancing by choice. Now I can't do that anymore. So it's unclear what will happen. We're not really exposed to that because we don't have that many contributors from California, surprisingly. But obviously we do have some freelancers. I mean, we have a lot more full-time employees. But the key, though, is I think, again, it's just like we did a video recently on expectations and mindset. The fact, though, that like people work in full-time jobs in media, I feel that is going to be really pressured. And I'll just explain why. I think what social media and what technology and what all these tools and technology platforms have done is it's really democratized content production, content curation, content distribution and all that. Meaning, whereas before, you had to either, and I'm not being a smartass here, but through nepotism or some kind of connection, land a cushy job where you could write 2 articles a week, working for Sports Illustrated. And I'm not saying you weren't good. You were an awesome writer, like awesome. You move people through words, which is like, such a, gift. But it was a job that people would kill to have. And you were kind of cushy. I think what the internet did, and I mean indirectly, whether it's blogs, whether it's the Bleacher Nation or just Twitter, is it's kind of like blown that up where it's like, well, yeah, why should one person have this cushy job when there's a line of a gazillion people waiting to replace that person? I forgot the gentleman's name, but he used to work at Splinter, before that Gawker, and his name escapes me, and I'm sure I will obviously think about
Should
it.
we Google it?
No, it's fine. Well, he basically just recently did an article where he was basically recapping his decade in media, right? And he was basically saying that, even though Hamilton Nolan, so Hamilton Nolan is like, critic of big media and a lot of things, and he's very passionate. But the point is, agree or disagree, it was an article that came around the new year where he kind of recapped his experience, starting from Gawker all the way to going to being laid off when Splinter was shut down. And he was kind of saying that, we'll just link to it because it's a great read. But the point I want to get to is it's just like that. There are so many people that would die to do that job. So it goes back to like the feeling of privilege instead of like the sense of entitlement, so to speak. But I feel that because of that, there will be a tremendous amount of pressure on these internet media jobs because the ones that are at least, I'm assuming these also exclude like business and marketing and sales and technology, and they're really more about editorial and whatnot if they're comparing to journalism. So I think that's going to be a lot of pressure going forward. But if you think about it, ContextTV, work, life, play, not everybody's an entrepreneur, but everybody has to be entrepreneurial. If you're listening to this, again, the messages should be positive. Think of the tremendous opportunities you have as a storyteller to leverage your voice, leverage these platforms, and be in control of your own destiny. And sure, you could freelance, you could work at a full-time job, but if you feel like you deserve more and you're like, I have the answer and I have the voice and I want to do more, you don't have to work for a company. You can actually go out there and kind of like build your own audience. Now, it's hard, it'll take time, everybody's out to steal your lunch, but again, it's more about the opportunity and less about the threat. So the same way that a decade ago I was like, hey, journalism degrees are not useless, they're just going to evolve into this new thing, which turned out to be jobs at the Vices and the Gawkers and the Watch Mojos.
I wonder what they teach in journalism school now.
Yeah, you know what? I am shocked at what they don't teach. I think what they should be teaching a lot more of are these like life/business tools, like invoicing, reading a contract, networking, taxes. The number of people that were like, you are aware you may have to pay taxes. Networking, just like how to navigate. I mean, oftentimes in job interviews, I am almost coaching the person to get to the finish line, and I'm like, they're smart, but they're not necessarily, conditioned to play that game, which you unfortunately have to play, right? Anyway, so I think it's more about this brave new world, this new world order, lots of opportunities. I think there's a lot, for those who want to put up with like that angst of, doing it, being in control of their own destiny, this new decade is going to just create even more opportunities, but it's going to be really hard.
This is going to open a can of worms, but I wonder if that's why there are so many more mental health issues now.
Okay, yes, I think mental health, I've spent a lot of time in the last few years examining that more through the lens of successful people, driven successful people with a focus and emphasis on entrepreneurs, but it spills into artists and athletes because they're also entrepreneurs in my eyes. If you look at LeBron James, he doesn't view himself as an athlete. I think it's pretty clear. He views himself as a human being who's like an entrepreneur of sorts who happens to have a comparative advantage in athletics, right? So I think it goes back to the tremendous, kind of drive to succeed, and again, not necessarily being the kind of person that is content with what they have. They always want more, not necessarily materialistic, not necessarily awards, but to win, however that means. And I think that the pace of change and, it's frenetic, you know what I mean? Like you can't actually, you're talking about a generation that has grown up with this, which is always down, always this. And I don't want to be like, okay, boomer, but I'm not a boomer, by the way, please. But I think it's just, you don't have the time, you don't have the runway as an individual, as a company, to actually develop. There's this expectation that you got to do 10 things at once, and by the time you kind of just wrap your head around doing something, both the opportunity and the landscape has changed. So it gives you whiplash, and I think that then manifests itself in a lot of a lot of anxiety and stress and uncertainty. And look, I do think, I studied finance, so before that I even thought I would go into economics. A lot of this is drawn in economics, which is for a generation, you have seen, the cost of education soar. Younger folks, when I was interviewing the gal from the Young Turks, I'm getting older, Emma Vigeland, she was like, look, it's a generation that went through student debt, 9/11, the economic apocalypse and the Lehman explosion, the recessions making it harder for them to get jobs, and then education creates this huge debt. And so now they can't even get jobs, and when they get jobs, they're being replaced by either AI or freelancers. Yeah, guess what? And that's why people could criticize me all they want for many things, and maybe 10% is valid, maybe more. But that's why we wanted to give stable jobs. You can disagree with a lot of things, but it was like, if you know where your next paycheck is coming, we're going to take a lot of that uncertainty off the plate. You can make a bit more money elsewhere. You can make more money freelancing, but that comes as a trade-off. But at the very least, that your paycheck is covered. You have a health plan. You have paid vacation. Last year, a couple of employees were pissed at me because we forced them to take their unused vacation. You were one, but you weren't pissed. You were just like, I wasn't picking on you, I swear. My point was, it's for you to go out and recharge your batteries. I'm sorry, I was not alluding to you, I swear. It's very transparent, this show. But so,
I didn't take them, for the record.
Oh, you did? All of them?
Yeah.
You took most, I hope.
No.
Oh my God. Anyway, sidebar. The point is, these things are not isolated, you're right, but it is about oneself. And I'm not saying it's all like, get it out of your mind. That's not what I'm saying. But I do feel it starts with yourself in the mirror, and you do control a lot, not all of it, but you do control a lot of it to gain control of that voice in your head and say, hey, go back in that corner, you're not needed.
I feel like this was a two-parter.
This was definitely, it wasn't planned to go there, but it did.
Sorry, that's my fault. What do you guys think? What was this? This was new
ask,
media versus journalism. Anyway, what do you think? Let us know in the comments, and we'll see you next time.